Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of RPGs with Paddy. I'm Paddy. So, after looking at the resources for the Golden Dawn in the last 3 videos, we're going to finally return to scenarios. So today's video is about The Room Beyond, which is the first and the introductory scenario in Golden Dawn sourcebook by Pagan Publishing. In this scenario, the investigators are lower-level members of the Golden Dawn and are approached by a more senior member to help him look into a confidential matter. That's all I can say before going into the spoilers. So, before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe. It would really help me spread the videos and grow the channel. So now, on to the spoilers. Call of Cthulhu is an investigative game, so if you already know what's going on, it can really ruin the experience for you. So players, please skip the rest of this video, unless you're planning on running it. Keepers, let's find out what it's all about. So, as stated in this scenario's introduction, the scenario itself is heavily influenced by From Beyond by H.P. Lovecraft. It's not too long, so it's definitely worth checking that out to get kind of a little bit of the feel for this scenario. This scenario is meant for first-time Gaslight players, so if your players are more experienced, they might not find it too much of a challenge, but it's still an introduction to the Golden Dawn, so it's well worth it. It's also fairly short, so you can finish it easily in one session. It's assumed that the players are already low-level members of the Golden Dawn, but you could include some introduction in this as well. So the scenario begins on September 23rd, 1893, at the autumnal equinox. The investigators are joining the equinox ritual at Isis Urania Temple, the main temple in London. Although previously in the book it says they're not going to talk about rituals of the Golden Dawn, there is a small pop-out box here giving a brief outline of the autumnal equinox ritual, which is nice. So that is useful if you want to use it, but of course you can kind of hand-wave it as well. So after the ceremony, they get to mingle with the various other members. And during this, each player is handed a small letter from another member, known only to them as a Frater Dedi, D-E-D-I. And they are told, look at this later, and alone. So they can attempt some rolls here to know that Dedi, or D-E-D-I, stands for Demon Est Deus Inversus. And that is the motto of William Butler Yeats. And they may already know him, or they may not. It's not important. For this scenario anyway. When they open the letter later, there is a request to meet Dedi at Constantine's, which is a restaurant in London, and they must not tell anyone else about it. Even though they are told repeatedly to keep this kind of secret, they can ask around, and there's details given here. But if Yeats finds out that they have asked around, he will hold it against the player. So when they meet later at a restaurant, a private room has been set aside, and Yeats, and from now on you should only refer to him as Dedi, and equally you should encourage the players to only refer to each other by their motto acronym as well. But anyway, Dedi won't discuss anything if any of the waiting staff from the restaurant are in the room. So after once again confirming in person that the investigators won't divulge anything here, that they can be discreet about it, he will tell them the situation. So one Lord Arthur Pelgrane wants to be a Golden Dawn member, but he wants to skip all of the outer order grades and jump straight into the inner order. Of course, this would normally be dismissed outright, not even considered it. But Lord Pelgrane says that he has a family secret which may provide a lot of occult knowledge to the Golden Dawn. So, Dedi wants the investigators to join him in inspecting the occult documents to see if a worthy claim can be made there. So after this, there's more casual conversation between them. But as I said, this is an introductory scenario, so I wouldn't drag this out too long. Just if the players have any questions about the Golden Dawn, about Dedi or something like that. Equally, they can ask more about Lord Pelgrane here, or they can do more research by themselves afterwards. With the relevant roles, either talking to Dedi or doing the research themselves, they can find out that Arthur is the only heir of Reginald Pelgrane, who died a few months ago in a carriage accident. Investigators will probably think maybe there's something suspicious about that. Actually, there's not. But again, you can use that to kind of build up their paranoia. But anyway, his family is pretty wealthy, but not particularly famous or well connected. And since Reginald died and Arthur took over the family, they seem to be kind of heading downhill in esteem, general standing as well, and possibly finances. So Arthur has already been on the kind of the fringes of a number of occult societies recently. And everyone kind of thinks he wants to have this bad boy reputation, but none of the occult societies really take him that seriously. Some of them, welcome him in because he has quite a lot of money. Arthur's grandfather was a relatively well-known occultist who was rumored to have died as a result of his use of magic. So there's also a little sidebar that we can see here explaining what should happen if the players decide to get some more information through tarot card readings. But now, on to the secret mystery. In the Pelgrane estate, there is a sealed up secret door, behind which is the study of Thomas Pelgrane, who is Arthur's grandfather. So there's Arthur, his father Reginald, and his grandfather Thomas. Reginald is not really important here, and he was just an upstanding member of the community. But Arthur is now trying to get into the Golden Dawn, and Thomas was his grandfather. So the room was sealed up after Thomas's death in 1845, and the doorway has kind of been plastered over, so it's not even visible. Arthur's father, Reginald, told Arthur about the family secret on his deathbed, but told Arthur never to open it. Naturally, Arthur is very intrigued by this. So Thomas, again the grandfather, found out that there is a shadow world parallel to our own. The Golden Dawn knows about this and calls it the astral plane, but that's only knowledge known to the inner order, so the players shouldn't know about this yet. But Thomas, again the grandfather, his research allowed him to attune to the plane, and he would regularly travel through the astral plane, and he could wander around as if he was in our world but unseen, and he could see whatever he wanted without people knowing about his presence. But his presence in the astral plane started to attract the attention of other beings. One day, while he was in the astral plane, he walked into his own master bedroom, invisibly or on another plane. But then he saw his wife, Andrea, was cheating on him with one of the servants, Robert. Thomas then became so enraged, stepped out of the astral plane and dragged Robert back into the astral plane. Thomas came back to the normal plane and beat up Andrea for cheating on him. Andrea after this, was quite afraid of her husband, but she started sneaking into his study to try and find out how to save Robert, like what had happened with him. She learned of a ritual, and she tried to cast it. And when she did, something that looked like Robert came back and immediately attacked and killed Thomas and 3 other servants. Andrea managed to dismiss the monster with the second half of the ritual, but this also destroyed her own sanity. After this, Andrea was put into a sanitarium, and Andrea's father took custody of her 2-year-old son, Reginald. Before she was taken away, Andrea ordered that the study be locked and the entrance sealed up, plastered over. But the activity here, so what happened in this plane, left a weakened passage between our material plane and the astral plane within this sealed up study. So Andrea casting 2 spells that she wasn't prepared to do, she kind of miscasts them a little bit. So that's the background information. And now back to your actual play. So assuming that the investigators do join Deddy, they go to the Pelgrane estate in Lockton, which is on the northeast outskirts of London. Arthur Pelgrane welcomes them and tells them pretty much the same story as far as he knows. His information is that his grandfather was a powerful sorcerer, caught his wife in bed with a servant, and took the servant off to the outside, which is what he calls the astral plane. His wife was scared into obedience, and then in an unrelated incident, Thomas called forth a monster too powerful for him to handle, and he was slain. So that's his understanding of it is pretty close, but a little bit wrong. But during Arthur telling this to the group, if anyone thinks to notice, Deddy seems quite intrigued because he is already aware of the astral plane through his Golden Dawn studies. If none of the investigators ask, but you should always allow the players the chance to ask it first, but sometimes in an introductory scenario they won't know what to ask. But Deddy can wonder aloud if any of the papers, Thomas's papers, were left behind. Arthur says that all of the papers were burnt, but that Andrea's diary remains within. And this is assuming this is what his father told him on his deathbed. So now, the whole party and Arthur and Deddy go and they start knocking down the plastered wall. After they knock out the plaster, there is a wooden door revealed behind, and it has a silver crucifix on it and a handwritten message that reads, "May the Lord's good grace watch over this damned room, and may he forgive the folly of those who enter." And this was written by the servant who sealed it up many years ago. Seeing this, Arthur laughs at the message, and as the door is opened, a strange smell comes out, which people can recognize as fresh blood. The room is about 20 feet square, and immediately the first thing everyone will notice is a blood stain on the floor, which is very fresh, causing a sanity roll. It doesn't seem that there's any source of the blood, but it's splashed around as if in a struggle. Other than that, there is a large work table, which looked like a kind of a chemistry setup, and there is also a large bookcase with old tomes. So it seems that despite what Arthur told you just a few minutes before, not all of the papers were burnt. So on the table, there are various jars with different powders, plants, and other less pleasant items. The only important thing here is Thomas Pelgrane's journal, or grimoire, which was not burnt. There's no explanation of this having been burnt, but then like reproducing itself or anything. It just, maybe it was missed, or maybe his father, lied. Maybe to stop Arthur from wanting to explore it as well. That's pretty much it on the table, but the bookshelves have a kind of an impressive selection of occult works, all predating 1845, which was when the room was sealed off. But Deddy lays claim to all of these. He says he's going to take them back, check them out, and if his Arthur's suggestion is successful, then he can join the Inner Order, and Deddy will kind of keep these as part of the Golden Dawn's library. But when Arthur sees the blood, it does shock him a little bit, and he starts to realize that maybe the stories were true. What's really happening here is that Thomas Pelgrane, when he was killed, he was kind of killed halfway in and halfway out of the astral plane, and thus the bloodstains from his death are constantly fresh and renewed. If anyone thinks to clean them up, they will reappear again. They will reappear again within a few hours, and seeing this can cause a little bit more sanity loss. But the barrier between the material plane and the astral plane is quite weak in this room. So anyone spending more than a few minutes in here has to succeed on a POW roll. Succeeding means that nothing happens, but failing will lead to something happening the following morning, as we will get to. So the investigators at this stage, in an introductory scenario, should not be advanced enough to use astral travel. But if they do know about it, there is a weird sense that both the astral plane and the material plane appear to exist wholly together at once. So it's this room is really an overlap. So even switching to another plane is a little bit strange. But not much more can be learned from that. One thing that the players will be aware of is the pentagram ritual. So all members learn the pentagram ritual when they join the Golden Dawn, and they may want to use it. It will work later, but not now. It kind of seems that it works now. But for it to work, the Thief of Form has to be in the room, basically. It's the main monster from this scenario. So after looking around the room, the result is that Deddy will take Thomas Pelgrane's journal and most of the occult tomes. An investigator can take Andrea Pelgrane's diary. It's not actually stated where this is, so just put it wherever you want. You could even have an investigator find it on the floor. But what I was thinking is it could have been thrown into the room and then sealed up. So it could just be in the middle of the floor. So Arthur, seeing all of this, is actually visibly shaken, but he does start to resist if anyone tries to remove anything from the room. He says that everything was as he claimed it to be, and nothing should be taken before he is admitted into the inner order. If none of the investigators, again, always let the investigators try something first, but if none of them can think of a reasonable excuse, then Deddy can rebuke him, saying that it's like he's questioning their honor. Of course, all of the books will be taken care of and returned safely after being inspected. And this kind of code of honor, Arthur has to kind of begrudgingly accept. So we do get a little bit of information from the diary of Andrea. And there's actually a player aid section for this. And it talks about the relation between Andrea and Thomas. One strange thing about this, and some of the other player aids in this book, is that it's given as a player aid, as in a handout, but within that description, it also includes some game mechanics, such as it requires an English roll and 6 hours, but the same information can be gained by skimming. Giving those mechanical information to the player is a little bit strange. So I think remaking this as kind of like a diary format with just like kind of a little bit of information, that's a little bit more thematic to give to the players. Anyway, the story is that Thomas's family was rich and Andrea was maybe a little bit of a gold digger, so she wanted the family money, and Thomas just had a strong desire to own anything he wanted, and so in this case he wanted to own Andrea, and so that's how they became wed, and the book describes them as a match made in hell. They were constantly cheating on each other with various servants, which caused a split in the house. But one time, and this was kind of like meaningless cheating as well, but one time Andrea fell in love with the valet, Robert. So throughout her time in the diary, Andrea only really passingly mentions her husband's interest in the occult. But after Thomas, kills Robert or drags him off to the astral plane, then she starts sneaking into the study when he is passed out drunk, and she kind of details what she finds. She wants to bring Robert back from the other plane, and to do that, she wants to use the first half of a spell called the Taking and the Keeping. When she cast the spell, it was a failure, and not a complete success anyway. The creature looked like Robert, but violently killed Thomas and 3 other servants. She managed to speak the second half of the spell, the Taking and the Keeping, and it sent the monster back. But she writes in her diary that she feels she didn't do it properly. And after that, she ordered a servant to seal it up while she was waiting to be taken away to the sanatorium. Anyway. So now we get some more secret keeper information. Thomas's notes were written only to be used by himself, so Andrea kind of misunderstood a lot of it. She summoned the Thief of Form, which is an astral parasite, which had devoured Roger on the astral plane and assumed his form. When she sent it back, it was done badly, causing the rift. And the rift is mostly harmless if left alone, but the presence of life forms around it causes it to react. So the players coming in, the investigators coming into this room, are starting to cause a reaction with the rift. So I would also recommend including in her diary either a sketch of her lover, probably a sketch of her lover, Robert, so that when they see the face of Robert later in the creature, it's a little bit scarier as well, because they have no idea what Robert looks like. So now, that's basically what will happen the first night, and if any of the investigators failed their POW roll while in the room, the following morning they will have some weird experiences or throughout the night. And you should dole these out at whatever pace you feel is right, and in whatever order you feel is right. And it says you should give this information to each of the players individually. There are 6 effects listed, but you could easily add your own too. The ones that are given are the investigator wakes up underneath their bed, having just obviously gone to sleep in their bed, and then they wake up under their bed. Another goes answers the door to get their breakfast from the servant, but the scream from the servant alerts them that they are totally naked, and they can look back, and on their bed is laid out exactly where they would have been sleeping, their nightwear. Another investigator wakes up to find bloody sheets. This should be used ideally with an investigator who did something with the blood in the room. The blood can be wiped away, but it returns immediately, and it will only disappear after about 6 hours. Another player finds that their hands have become insubstantial. They can't touch anything. Their hands just kind of pass through everything that they try to touch. But this only lasts for about an hour, and then they become substantial again, I guess. One investigator wakes up normally, but within an hour starts to feel tiny bites all over their skin, as if from insects, and they start to grow, the marks start to grow clearer and clearer until it shows kind of like a sucker-like wound about the size of a coin. And if, in the rare chance, one of your investigators already has experience with astral travel, they wake up on the astral plane. And so this is described a little bit later. I would probably avoid this because it really separates that one investigator from the party, and they can't really interact for, the main part of this adventure. But anyway, in the morning, if the investigators have not already sought each other out, so remember, they've all got this information individually. If they haven't kind of sought each other out to discuss what's going on, or if they haven't thought to reach out to Deddy, Deddy will come and gather all of them in the carriage. So he kind of goes by one to each of their houses, gathering them into his carriage. And he says he's been seeing weird creatures around him all morning. They do seem totally oblivious to him, but he's seeing these weird kind of creatures kind of flying through the air. But there was one that noticed him and bit his hand. This is the perfect time for the investigators to kind of share their weird experiences with each other. And the players may notice, if that's the case, that one of their party is not present and is not answering their door. They are still in the astral plane. So there are a few ways for the players to get to the astral plane, and only one way to get out of it. When the investigator awakens on the astral plane, if you're doing it, they'll have lost 5 magic points and 1d4 sanity. The investigator can do astral travel or attempt to communicate with the real world, as described in the main part of the book. But because their body is on the astral plane, not just their mind, all sanity loss will happen immediately. But it also means they have no normal way to get back to the real world. So their only way really to get back is to travel on the astral plane to the Pelgrane Manor and step through the rift. But that area is really, at the moment, as the players will find out later, really surrounded by a lot of astral parasites. So going there on your own is probably a bit of a death sentence. So the rest of the group can free their companion by using the spell Ether Portal, which is contained within Pelgrane's journal, in which they travel to the astral plane and bring back the trapped investigator. This is kind of what Pelgrane used on Robert, the valet. If other investigators know about normal astral travel, just using their mind, they can go there in spirit and talk to the trapped investigator, but can't bring them back. And once on the astral plane, investigators will be attacked by astral parasites fairly regularly. So the original trapped investigator is particularly at risk. So a lot of this is based on the players knowing something about the astral plane, which they shouldn't know if they're just relatively low-level members. Equally, in Pelgrane's journal, Deddy is supposed to have taken that. And so if the players don't have access to that, then they won't have access to the Ether Portal spell, which means they won't be able to travel over there and rescue their partner. So, yeah, unless you're working with experienced Golden Dawn members, I probably wouldn't send one of your players to the other plane. Or you could have like a friend, an NPC friend of theirs sent over there. But obviously that means bring them in to the Pelgrane estate and everything like that as well. But hopefully the party will want to go back to the Pelgrane estate, where everyone is currently either dead or dying. There's dead bodies all around, and you should describe this in a lot of detail. It's done quite well and creepily in the book. For example, you have a man's arm dangling from the ceiling. There's no hole in the ceiling. It's just coming out from the ceiling. And a ring on the arm identifies it, on the hand, identifies it as Arthur Pelgrane, and he's still alive. So during the night, because of the presence of the investigators near the rift has widened and many creatures have come through, killing pretty much everyone. Probably the players want to go to the room with the rift. The book also suggests that they may want to rescue Arthur Pelgrane, although I find that a little bit less likely. He's a bit of an arrogant ass, and the other option, potentially, is saving their companion. But anyway, if they decide to try and save him, he's in his bedroom, and during the night, similar to what the players experienced, his arm kind of traveled through the astral plane and came out, but now he is firmly lodged in the floor of his bedroom, and his arm is kind of coming out of the ceiling of the room below. His body is covered with parasitic bites, and his mind is totally blasted. If you leave him like this, he will be dead by nightfall. But he can't be easily removed because he's kind of bonded to the floor. There's no solution given to this. It's completely up to the players how to handle it. Deddy will want to go to the secret room and investigate the breach, and presumably the investigators will too. So once there, the pentagram ritual that all Golden Dawn members know can be used to close the rift. If the players are experienced in the Golden Dawn and of the Inner Order, they may also be aware of the spell Bind Astral Parasite. And this is also in Thomas Pelgrane's journal. But strangely enough, this will not work on the Thief of Form, as it is not engaged in parasitic feeding. So you can kind of skip that. The way forward is not so clear, but let the players try and figure it out. And only as a last resort should Dedi suggest using the pentagram ritual. So going through the house and getting to the rift should be scary but very survivable. You should show bodies of dead servants, and you should hear the screams of the Thief of Form, but not see it until you get to the room beyond. There should be regular attacks by astral parasites, and Dedi should get bitten a few times, but should not be killed. As the investigators should also not be killed at this stage, ideally. The astral parasites all have different forms, and there's 4 nice sample ones here, which gives a nice inspiration even for you to create your own, and it makes them quite distinct as well. And this is a really good part about Call of Cthulhu games, is not saying you get attacked by an astral parasite, but describing what they look like. And in this way, you'll be describing 4 quite distinct forms, creatures, so the players won't necessarily know that this is the same thing that's attacking them. So that's a very nice point. So once they finally reach the study, the rift is more noticeably active. There's kind of like a hazy section in the middle of the room. And now is when the Thief of Form comes in. It's not clear if he comes in from the astral plane or if he comes from one of the other rooms in the house. He comes into the study and he's going to attack without mercy. The thief should at one point resemble Robert. And remember I said, I think you should include a sketch of him in Andrea's diary. And then it will sometimes kind of change, or it can be kind of like half and half, to resemble Thomas, the original murdered grandfather. So the players can recognize that, have some portraits of Thomas around the house as well. The players should try to close the void quickly, but this is also the last chance for anyone who is trapped on the astral plane to get back out into the real world. Once the final words of the pentagram ritual, or some other solution if they have it, once that is spoken, all astral creatures in the area scream and kind of get stretched out to infinity. The thief will try to grab onto a nearby investigator and try to drag them into the astral plane too. If it makes a successful attack, it grabs the investigator. The investigator will have to succeed on a strength contest, or if someone attacks the thief, it will let go of the investigator. Successfully attacks, that is. So once it's over, the players can flee the scene or call the authorities. The only witness to this who's still alive is Dedi's driver, who is completely loyal and won't say anything. Regardless of what is done, Arthur Pelgrane won't survive the night, so he can't kind of give any evidence, and the whole adventure kind of resolves itself there. They got all the occult knowledge, and Arthur didn't have to come into the Inner Order, but of course he died. Dedi will be very grateful to the investigators, but he'll gather all of the documents and store them secretly. He will also swear all of the investigators to absolute secrecy. And so that is pretty much where the scenario ends. It's actually a very quick scenario, but it leaves a lot of room for role-playing, first with the Equinox ritual, talking with the other Golden Dawn members afterwards, the meeting with Yates, possibly researching into the Pelgranes, investigating the house, waking up to all the weird things happening the next morning, and then finally dealing with the attack at the estate. It does introduce players to the idea of the Golden Dawn, some of their rituals, and it gets them hopefully a good connection with an important member within the organization. It also hints at more magic that the Inner Order has. So it might entice players to want to get to those higher levels to unlock the deeper knowledge. The only slight problem with this is that at the Inner Order, Astral Travel and Bind or Summon Parasite are the only real spells that can be learnt. And potentially in this scenario, the investigators might have already used them. Um, so that's just a little bit of a strange thing. It's supposed to, I think, it's supposed to entice the players to want to get to the higher levels to learn more of those secrets. But they've already learned kind of everything mechanically useful. But anyway, if the keeper wants to abandon historical accuracy, the Inner Order might have access, very restricted access, to some mythos magic. But of course, this can be dealt with in later scenarios. The only part of it that I would avoid, really, as I mentioned earlier, is putting one of the PCs in the astral plane as they wake up. Because that player will essentially be out of the role playing unless they figure a way out. If they have experience and they know about communicating with the real world, then they can plan to meet the other players at the estate. Or they can actually be there in, like, they can go with the players kind of like in spirit, possibly. But if they don't have that experience, they'll likely be out of the role playing for an extended period. Instead, to force the action back to the estate, that PC, whoever you choose, could have had night visions of Arthur and the estate under attack from parasites. Or even you could have they dream that they take the form of Arthur while he is being attacked, or one of the servants while they're being attacked. Or they could dream that they take the form of the thief of form, the monster, and watch helplessly as they attack the servants. To keep the mystery a bit higher, you could still have this investigator not present at their house, but instead comes running up the carriage still in their nightclothes, barefoot and barely lucid, telling everyone to quickly go to the estate. So when the players first arrive at the house, the investigator isn't there, and then they start to get a little bit worried, and then they come running up still, obviously in their nightwear, and that kind of like guides the players to say, hey, we should go to the estate. So this book is, of course, a little bit of an older book, published in 1996. So the quality of the handouts is nowhere near what modern players are used to these days. That's absolutely fine. But just one thing I mentioned earlier is in the player handouts that are given in the book, they also include some game mechanics, which is a little bit strange. Really, there's only one really important handout, which is Andrea's diary. But there's enough information kind of given there for you to write a few pages yourself, a few little diary entries, and use that as a handout, and then don't mention about the actual mechanics of it. And then that way it can look like her actual diary rather than just giving an overview. So I am in the process of making a handout for this, and I will be sharing the link below once it's finished, so feel free to help yourself to that. I've also added in another handout, which is a view of the door and the warning on it as well, just so that the players can see what that's like as well. And yeah, the link for that will be below. Feel free to use that as much as you want if you're running this scenario. But all in all, I think this is a great introductory scenario. This is something that I feel has been missing from other Gaslight productions. A simple, short scenario to help the players get engaged with the era, and in this case, to get engaged with the Golden Dawn. You can definitely finish it in one session, but if your players are really enjoying the role-playing, like different aspects of it, you can definitely extend it out longer. It's also kind of cool to be involved in a secret within a secret society. So you're in the secret society, the Golden Dawn, and then you're within a secret within that, with only your investigating party and Deddy as well. It's kind of layers upon layers of secrecy. And if you do relatively well, it will give you a great, important contact in the Golden Dawn going forward. There's no huge mystery, and you kind of find out all of the information pretty quickly. But that's kind of what an introductory scenario should be like. It gives the players a taste of it, it gives them a feel, and then they can use that knowledge kind of going forward. Really helps them get into that era. Okay, so that is going to do it for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. The next video in the series will be the next scenario from the book, which is Hell Hath No Fury by Steve Hatherley. Okay, so that's it for today. Have a great weekend, everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye.